guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade. So obviously it's been kind of a little bit of a while coming. I've been quite late in getting this one out, but we're going to be taking a look at the Liao's Rangers. Or at least that's the pronunciation I'm going to go with. I tend to not do very well on pronunciations, but Liao's Rangers, or maybe we should just stick with upgraded Fire Lancers. Maybe I'm safer doing that. I just kind of wanted to cover them. Obviously, this is the main unit, or supposedly, you know, the top tier unit of Season 6. Got to kind of take a look at them. Are they any good? Are they worth unlocking? And is it worth sort of putting the time and effort to complete the unit challenges to get these guys unlocked? Obviously, they are the upgraded version of the Fire Lancers. And probably compared to more than any other previously promoted unit, they feel like Fire Lancers. They don't feel radically different. They have very similar playstyles. You know, for example, if you look at the Stalwarts, they are radically different. You know, they have a brace, they perform completely differently, they lose their cover commander. A very, very different unit to Spear Sergeants. These Rangers feel very, very similar to the Fire Lancers. And I must admit, so far, very, very disappointing. Now, I think I'll probably qualify this by saying I would be surprised if these guys don't get a buff at some point. I think there's some talk of it happening on Frontier, so we may end up seeing that coming across to our version pretty soon. So we may end up having to revisit these guys with a second video, particularly if they sort of buff their damage or their gun charge or anything like that, because currently they feel pretty lackluster, particularly for a Golden Era Tier 5 unit at 315 leadership and some pretty hefty kit costs, particularly once we're out of season and that 50% reduction goes off. Then, you know, they're not a cavalry unit that is really going to stand up to things like Hussars or Keshigs or even Monastics, and there's going to be not that much reason realistically why you would pick them. So if we break down initially into their attributes, they do get a lot of hit points, 13,000. I mean, it's certainly not to be sniffed at, and in combination with a half decent defense attributes, you know, almost 700 slashing defense isn't too bad. 670 on their piercing defense. You know, it's not great, and if you start getting shot at by high-tier archers or muskets, or any muskets, you know, realistically you're going to be taking a really good chunk of damage. But again, some of the lower-tier stuff, it is enough armor to make a reduction in the amount of damage you're going to be taking. So, yeah, it does add something. I've obviously gone down the bottom veterancy line. Now, if you were around when I played these guys on the PTR server, probably a month or two ago now, I found them to be really very buggy, and I said that in the video that I did on them. They sort of charged and stopped without really passing through. They weren't really very effective, and I didn't really like how they played. I didn't feel their firing attributes were really very good, and the way their firing mechanics worked seemed kind of disappointing to me. Now, they have certainly improved that. They do actually charge now, and at least they do pass through enemy units. So a lot of the real core bugs have been fixed now, although they actually weren't when the unit first went live on the live server. But they still don't feel like a great unit, and the gun feels like a secondary element to me. And that's kind of why I've gone down this bottom with their devastation, rather than unlocking the blast. The blast fires at a designated target, which is fine in principle, but the unit won't auto-fires anyway, and when they sort of use the blast, they basically walk up to a unit, pretty much into the unit when they then fire. And they do get the shot off sort of at vaguely the target you're aiming at, but they then kind of wander into the unit anyway, so you might as well just gun charge in. At least that's kind of been my experience. So the bottom line seemed the more worthwhile line to be going for. And on top of that, you actually get some nice things like this 10% defense increase on the bottom of the line. I thought was kind of nice, as well as some of the health buffs. Plus, for me, the bludgeon is one of the main abilities that they get, which actually works relatively well. You can see that over here. It's a bit like Sealadars on horses. I think that might be the closest comparison I can come up with. And the bludgeon is actually quite a big AoE and fairly damaging, but there is a delay in activation. So when you hit your 2 key for bludgeon, it then takes, 1, 2, and then they swing. So that's kind of frustrating because it means, particularly as a fairly fast-moving unit, it's very easily to pass through and come out the other side of the enemy unit when your bludgeon activates, which obviously is kind of frustrating when you end up swinging in the middle of the air. So yeah, all in all, a fairly challenging unit to use, and not one that I've particularly enjoyed playing, although it does have its occasional moments. And for me, my favourite bit is actually using the gun charge on enemy heroes, particularly when they're sort of wandering around on their own, ahead of their unit, sort of feeling all confident and cocky on their horse, and then you just gun charge them, and you know, 16 models all fire these fire staffs all at once, and it just completely shreds the enemy hero. That can be quite satisfying, but apart from that, I've not found them to be tremendously useful as a unit. But kind of enough waffle. Let's actually hop into some battles then, see how we've been getting on with them, see sort of what uses they can possibly have in matches. So for the first clip, we are on the new but old map of Hidden City. Depends how long you've been in the game, I suppose. And this small player is being rather cocky, and this is going to be his undoing, because he doesn't really expect the damage a volley from these lancers can do. And straight away, first room, he's dead. But he's called his hussars to him, and that's a mistake, because now in hand-to-hand like this, we can win. I very nearly get myself killed on the hussars, but I keep myself alive long enough and I'm actually able to activate my bludgeon. And yeah, well, you can see we absolutely slaughter the hussars in hand-to-hand like that. And that's really going to be the only way that you're going to be predominantly winning against hussars in this fight. If they get the charge off against you, you are going to get flattened and slaughtered. But as long as you can either bait their charge, kill their hero, anything in that sort of situation, then realistically in hand-to-hand you're going to be able to do a pretty reasonable job of killing them. So that's why I say these guys are quite nice for hunting down and killing enemy heroes. They seem to work quite well in that sort of capacity. So for the next clip, we are into Harbour City. Quite a good map for cavalry, really, all things considered. It's quite an open map. Also got a lot of alleyways, passageways, which can kind of sneak your cavalry down and around. And so you can get quite a few different approach angles on the fairly open square around the gate where most of the enemies are going to be spawning and coming in. So with that, I kind of noticed that they are pushing a little bit up to the supply point, a couple of enemy units pushing in different alleyways, so I'm calling my unit to me, and I'm kind of looking for my opportunity of where I'm going to be wanting to go. Initially, I thought I might as well go and have a bit of a go at this short sword, it's obviously in iron sights, but as we round the corner, they're trying to shoot as they turn the corner, and yeah, they just don't really hit very well. We managed to get the kill actually just through the bludgeon, but kind of goes to show how subjective that firing can be. We then run into a full stack of Janissaries. I was a little bit slow in getting the unit position, but actually we don't take all that much damage. We flatten that enemy maul pretty quickly, and once the unit gets into a small scale hand-to-hand like this, they do really well. Straight onto the glaive, yeah, I mean he just, yeah, and straight through the unit of Namkhans. When you get those individual fights like that, when you can isolate them so you're just dealing with the unit of Janissaries and a hero, just dealing with the unit of Namkhans and a hero, when it's not that big cluster, that's when they work really well. Well, perhaps not even really well, but they work. They're usable, because they can deal with those isolated fights. And in the hand-to-hand, particularly once you get the bludgeon activated, you know, they are actually a decent unit. So with that, anyway, I was heading back to the supply point. I do kind of enjoy the occasional random kill you get. These units, obviously, because they've got their fire lancers and they sort of auto-fire, you know, as you're running past an alleyway, if there's just a stray unit down there or something, they just quickly let off a musket ball and sometimes secure the occasional kill. So they are quite good fun for that. I do kind of enjoy them in that capacity. But with that happening, I'm kind of back on the move and deciding where I want to go. And I make a mistake here. Why I rounded this corner, I quickly managed to snap off my gunfire charge. It helps us a little bit, but realistically, those Armigers slaughtered me in that charge. But we got away with it because the unit has 13,000 hit points. And yeah, it was just a bad move on my part. Shouldn't have rounded that corner, or at least I should have checked the corner before I moved my unit around it. Kind of goes to show how this unit is almost always going to be losing in charges. They don't have a charge ability. Obviously, they're not lance cavalry. They fire before their charge, which is nice, but it doesn't stun, so it doesn't stop a cavalry charge. And you're never going to be winning sort of head-to-head in that charge, kind of as we've seen there. But we kind of got away with it because they're a fairly tanky unit. So anyway, with ourselves healed back up for the second time, we're back onto the open ground, trying to find what I want to go. So I'm feeling pretty happy at the moment. You know, we've wiped out a good couple of units, looking good. Actually, one of my first really nice games I've had with them, and I see this unit of halberdiers. I kind of wanted to see how they would do. They were out of brace, so I was kind of curious there. But initially, I messed up the charge, so I didn't get a clean hit. I do get my bludgeon off, and you kind of see about the AoE damage I'm talking about. But because the damage isn't that high, unfortunately, it doesn't really kill the whole unit in one like I wanted it to. Then the impikes walk in and start to advance, which really traps me and kills the bulk of the unit in the tunnel. And then with only 5 guys left, yeah, basically nothing else realistically I'm going to be doing effectively. So I just try and take as many people with me as I can as we get sort of closed down in this final bit of the game. We still get a few final kills with the bludgeon, but not all that much. So the bludgeon is nice, but I was kind of disappointed that the damage there wasn't just that little bit higher, because if it was, it could have been a lot more effective, I think. And that really sums up my experience with the units so far in most circumstances. They can be okay in isolated situations. Probably their biggest asset is their hero killing ability, and you can use that with the gun charge. It is quite nice. Their bludgeon can be effective, but given how quickly the unit can die, and the bludgeon is not realistically like the Sealidars where it's going to be wiping out units in that clustered way, in one hit, then realistically it's all too easy to find yourself outpositioned and just getting completely wiped out. I feel like I'm outclassed by most other T5 cavalry, and realistically, given the choice, I would certainly be taking Hussars or Monastics or even Keshiks over these new Fire Lancers. So for me, they're an interesting unit. They have their moments, but not one that I think is really worth grinding for in the current state. But as I say, maybe that is something that's going to be changing in the future. I know they're sort of looking at introducing some buffs in Frontier, so hopefully we'll see that maybe in a week or two carried across to us on the my.com version. So if we do, then that's something we'll probably be reviewing again to see if the unit has had much of an improvement with those changes. But anyway, hopefully you've still enjoyed the video. If you have, do let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, subscribe to the channel for a lot more Conqueror's Blade content. So thanks for watching guys, and I shall see you all on the next video.